Welcome to a new session, and in this session we are going to be exploring about the application load balancer. We know about the application load balancer that it is operating at layer 7 and supports HTTP and HTTPS. I hope you would have already reviewed the relevant documentation before coming into this video in the LMS. Alright, so let's jump straight into the setup now. Okay, so the first step here that we want to do is let's go ahead and set up 3 instances, and let's keep all the 3 instances as web servers. So let's assume an idea that we want to have the traffic routed from the clients to 2 different set of target groups. Okay, so here we have the concept of target groups, which means that when the traffic is coming into the load balancer, the load balancer based on the rules set on the listener is going to be routing the traffic to the target groups, right? So we are going to be setting the whole setup now. Okay, so the first step is to create 3 instances. All right, so my first instance, I'm going to deploy it using the Amazon Linux 2 AMI, and I'm going to use the T2 micro instance, which is free tier eligible, and I'm going to be deploying the 3 instances in 3 different availability zones within the Ohio region. All right, so I'm going to be doing it manually. So I'll put the first one in 2A, and most importantly, I'll want to import. I'll want to do some bootstrapping here to ensure that I am able to see to which instance the traffic is being routed. Alright, so that was, let me just review the codes. Update, install, start, enable, and I'll add host 1. So each of the hosts I'll add host 1, host 2 and host 3, alright, for us to differentiate better. Add storage, add tags, and configure security group. In this, I'm going to set up a security group in such a way it can be accessible as a web server. Okay, so I'll call this as web server security group, and it will use SSH, and also we will use the HTTP, and we will allow HTTP to come from anywhere. All right. Okay. The next is review and launch, and launch, and I'm not going to be generating a key pair here because I can go without a key pair using the instance connect. So let me go and launch the instance now. So the first instance is launching. Let me go ahead and launch the second instance now. So the first instance I put into A, availability zone, instance details, subnet, I'll put it in 2B, and again I'm going to copy this content. I'll call this as host 2. This part of the host name, this part of the code brings in just the host name. Yeah, so for us to understand better. Okay, all right. Just in case. Okay. Alright, so that seems to be good. Add storage, add tags, configure security group. I'll use the existing security group which I already created, which is the web server security group. Review and launch, and I'll go without a key pair. Alright, so that was on 2B. Now let me launch the third instance, and let me put it in 2C. That was Amazon Linux 2 AMI. That was T2 micro. The availability zone is 2C. Add the code here for bootstrapping. Alright. I'll just add host 3. Okay. Alright. all of them are set. Configure security group. I'm going to use the existing security group, which is the web server security group. Review and launch, and I'm going to proceed without a key pair because I have access to the console and I can use the instance connect. Alright, so now we have all the 3 instances coming up. Alright, now while the instances are coming up, let's go and configure the load balancer. Okay, let me open the load balancer in a new console. So we don't have any load balancers at the moment. So I'm going to create an application load balancer. The application load balancer works at layer 7, supporting HTTP and HTTPS traffic. Alright. We'll call this as app ELB. Okay. And the scheme is internet facing. IP address type, we will use IPv4. The network mapping, we will use the default VPC. And here comes the important part. Alright. So we want to ensure that the load balancing is going to be happening across all the 3 availability zones. So we have to check for all the 3 availability zones here. Alright. So we have selected all the 3 availability zones. And the security group, we want to add the web server security group. Alright. I know that we don't need the SSH. I am aware of that. But to be sure that we are on the the security groups are saying we are allowing it on the load balancer. Remember, the load balancer is not going to allow us any connectivity to the load balancer to handle it. So you cannot SSH to the load balancer. However, I'm selecting the web server security group because the web server security group is opening the port 80 for us. Right. So next is the listeners and routing. So we are going to use the HTTP protocol here, and we have to select a target group. So I don't have a target group yet. So let me go ahead and create 2 target groups. Alright. Okay, I'm going to be using the target group for the instances as the target group here within the target group. We also we have the option to use IP addresses, Lambda functions, or another application load balancer also. But here, for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll keep it with the instances. And the target group name, I'll call it as TG1. Protocol is HTTP and port 80. And I'm going to use the protocol version HTTP1. Then comes the important part, which is the health check. Whether you want to use the HTTP or HTTPS. We will use the HTTP here. And the path, as usual, will be the root or index.html. We can use either of them. So we'll leave it at root only. And let's go to the advanced health settings. In the advanced health settings, the healthy threshold, we will put it at 2. Unhealthy threshold, the healthy threshold, we'll put it at 3. Unhealthy threshold, we'll put it at 2. Then the timeout, we'll put it at 4. And the interval, we'll put it at 5. So we've seen already all the the explanation for what is the healthy threshold, unhealthy threshold, timeout, and interval during the learning of classic load balancers. So the concept is same. Alright, let me click on next now. So I have 3 instances available at the moment. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 instances right now and I'm going to assign it to this particular target group. Alright, for the purpose of that, I'll take 2A and 2B. Include as pending below. Or let's come back to this later. We want to see how they become healthy. Alright, so let me just create the target group for now. Okay, so we have not associated any load balancer. Okay, so we can go here and register the targets, but let's just hold on to that. Okay, alright, and meanwhile, let's go back and create a second load target group. I'll create a target group. I'll keep it as instances, and I'll call this as TG2, and I'll set the same here. Healthy threshold is 3, unhealthy threshold is 2, Timeout is 4 and the interval is 5 seconds. I'll keep all of them. Next. And I'm not going to add any target at the moment, and I'll create the target group. So remember, I have created the target groups, however, I have not associated any instances with them, and it is not associated to the load balancer also. But now let's come back to the balancer. So as a first step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a target group. So let me select the first target group, which is the TG1. All right. And the AWS Global Accelerator, I'm not going to touch it now. We'll come back to it later. And I'm going to create the load balancer. Okay. So now the load balancer is provisioning. All right. Now let's come back to the target groups here. I'll take up the target group 1. Remember, we have already assigned the target group 1 to the application load balancer which we had created. So let's refresh this page. And we can see that TG1 is associated with the App ELB load balancer, and there are no associated targets with this. So let me go and register targets here. And I'm going to be selecting 2 instances. Right, 2A and 2B. Alright, I'm going to include as pending below, and let me register pending targets. Now we can see that the health status is showing as initial. Alright, so we will have to wait for the health status to become healthy. Let's first check on this. It is going to take a while, because remember, always the health check is going to be the is going to take precedence before bringing into the load balancer. So they have to go through the entire process. So approximately that's going to take like about 15 to 20 seconds for the instances to become a part of the target group and then recognized by the load balancer, right? So we'll have to give it a few seconds there. So it still shows that a target registration is in progress. All right. Do refresh this part of it quite frequently, because the chances of refresh at the background sometimes does fail. Right. So we do see that there are 2 targets which are healthy now. All right. Good. So now let us go and access the load balancer. So how do we access the load balancer? The application load balancer uses the DNS name. All right. So we have the DNS name generated for the application load balancer. Let me copy this and let me try to access the application load balancer. All right. Okay. So we got the first response, and the first response came from host 2. And let me refresh it. Yes. So it's now routing to host 1. All right. So the target group 2 the target group 1 is working successfully. So the load balancer is working successfully. But remember, this is only the first target group that we had created. So this is one rule that we have put in. Alright, so now let me go ahead and configure another rule on the listener so that I can route to an entirely different traffic when I'm going to be let's say the traffic comes from an altogether different set of webs, geography, or altogether a different set of, rule. We have many rules to put in there. We'll see the rules one by one. But before going there, so we can see that now as of now, the application load balancer is routing perfectly to one target group. Let's go and set the second target group now. Let's go back here. All right. And we've already seen the, how to make the instances healthy or how to register the targets, right? So for this, let me go and click on register targets, and let me add the third instance here, which is in US East 2C. Okay. Register pending targets. All right. We know that, currently the health status is unused. We don't have in the load balancer associated with this particular target group. So let's go back to the load balancer. All right. So how am I going to associate that? So to do that, go to the listeners, and we have one listener already. So let's go and edit the rules here. All right. So we have one rule which we already created. So I'm going to add another rule now. Okay. Probably we can just review this rule once before we go there. So it says if requests otherwise not routed. So which means that by default it pretty much means by default. All right, to go to TG1. That's what it means. All right. Let me go back and create a new rule there, and I'm going to add a new rule. In this rule, what I'm going to do is I have options such as host header, the path from where it is coming, the HTTP header, the HTTP request method, the query string, and the source IP. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to use the source IP, and I'm coming in from a different IP address altogether. So I'm going to find out what's the IP address of my machine from where I am connecting. Alright, so at the moment, what's my IP? That would be 27.52.41.36. Excellent. Alright, let me go and add in the IP address here. /32. So that's important to mention the CIDR value here. Then go and click on action, and I want to forward it. Remember, so if the source IP is going to be coming from a set of IP ranges, I'm going to be forwarding it to another target group. All right, I'll use the target group 2 now. Okay. All right. Remember this group level stickiness. We will talk about a stickiness in a completely different module. All right. Okay. Now let me save this. Good. All right. Now let's go back to the target group and let's refresh this. And we can see that the TG2 is now attached to the app ELB, all right, or the application load balancer, and you can see that the health status is showing as initial. All right, let's wait for the process to complete. All right, it's become healthy now. Let me open the application. All right, and let me pick up the app ELB here. And let's see what's happening when I am trying to access this particular instance. All right. And that is getting routed to host 3. All right. So whenever all incoming traffic, by default will be routed to TG1, and whenever a traffic is coming from a specific address or a range of IP address or with a specific set of headers, we can route it to another set of target group. And how many target groups we can create? We can create as many target groups you want. So you can even merge 2 target groups, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. But I would since the application load balancer is very powerful, AWS wants us to move into the application load balancer, and they want us to move out of the classic load balancer. All right. Okay. So that's about it for this session, and I'll thank you very much for watching this session, and I'll meet you in another session.